Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Justice, and today we are diving back into the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise with Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. And I genuinely wish I was this clever to come up with a synopsis for this movie on my own, but I very much am not, and I was scrolling on Letterboxd, and I saw a Letterboxd review that sums this movie up perfectly. In this installment, Freddy Krueger goes after a twink and his beard, and there is no better way to say that, and I feel like if you've seen this movie, you know exactly what I am talking about. If you wanted an actual plot synopsis for this movie, though, it follows a teenage boy who is haunted in his dreams by deceased child murderer Freddy Krueger, who is out to possess him in order to continue his reign of terror in the real world. This is the infamous gay entry of the franchise, and yes, it may have only been the sophomore installment to these movies, but Freddy's second outing is quite clearly one of the biggest black sheeps of the franchise, with few connections to the first film. Pretty much as well, every other entry has some kind of bleed through with returning actors and characters, and then there's this one that has a few passing mentions of Nancy throughout the film, but other than that, there's not much, and even the rest of the films after this ignore everything that took place here. Is it because of the gay of it all? Probably just a little bit, and because this movie does break some very much nightmare rules that go against all of Freddy Krueger's things in his playbook. Even on his second outing, they threw that rule book away, man. It is unfortunate to me that every movie after this ignores everything that took place here. Saying that, though, the movie isn't my favorite by any means either. In fact, there is a lot wrong with it, but it isn't anywhere near the worst thing this series has to offer. In fact, there are other movies we're going to get to in this franchise that I'm genuinely dreading rewatching for you guys. But even in this installment, Freddy's MO is completely different than what it typically is, and the way Freddy treats his main final boy is far different than the way Freddy treats his final girls of the franchise. Rather than wanting to kill Jesse, he wants his body, and if that sounds pretty damn gay, then you'd be correct, because this movie, as I've already stated a couple times, is gay as fuck. I mean, the insane amount of man-ass we get throughout it is a clear enough sign. And it's super ironic to me when you're watching interviews with directors, writers, and anyone else who worked on this film behind the scenes. They had no clue that this film was so gay, even though there is a scene of them all in a gay bar. There's so many BDSM moments. There's a BDSM kill in this movie. And then, of course, you have all of your male characters, or at least the main ones anyways, constantly shirtless and sweaty throughout the entire movie. Like, if this isn't all gay, then I don't know what is. To go over some of the main players in this film, you have Grady, who is easily my crush of this franchise. Like, why have our main final girl, Lisa, when you can have Grady? He is 100% the kind of jock that high school Justice would have fully swooned over, been head over heels for, man, but in the same breath, too, he'd have had absolutely no idea I existed. Unlike me, though, Jesse has every intention to make sure that Grady knows that he exists.
Something is trying to get inside my body.
Yeah, and she's female and she's waiting for you in the cabana. And you want to sleep with me.
You see them bicker with each other at the beginning of the film, before forming an unlikely friendship. The two were the enemies to lovers we deserved in this franchise, but never ever truly got. And speaking of Lisa from a moment ago, in any other entry, she'd have been our main character, and here she's more or less sidelined so that Jessie can be our scream queen of the film. And I enjoy her friendship with Jessie, and I do think she very much comes into her own towards the end, and she has a few memorable scenes, especially when she goes toe-to-toe with Freddy Krueger himself. But unfortunately, because she never is truly our focal point of the film, I feel like her character is hard to latch onto, especially with the fact her character is mainly focused on her romance with Jesse. A romance that is more than hard to believe or care about, for that matter, with how obvious it is that Jesse's a total flaming homo. On the subject of Jesse as well, he is easily one of my favorite final girls, with no other word I really know how to put there, I guess. I do enjoy the change up. Instead of just having Freddy coming after them and trying to kill him, there's like this whole intimate setting and feeling to it as Freddy's trying to possess him and take over his body. The entire notion of it is inherently erotic in its own way, especially with the fact that this is the only time that Freddy mainly goes after a male character, and this is the only time that this is his motive to do such. It very much almost makes the subtext just text. And how can one not bring up Mark Patton's very improvised dance scene that apparently got played in gay bars quite frequently, and sometimes on loop for that matter, of him using his booty to close the dresser drawer. This film, though, has a lot of really memorable scenes for all of its flaws, but you also can't ignore other scenes, like with the buck-ass bird that just flies around and then blows up, only for Jesse's father to appear a little bit later and try to blame the whole thing on cherry bombs and accusing Jesse of blowing up a bird. And it's just odd to me that Freddy felt the need to blow up a couple parakeets. Like, strange choice there, man. But other than that, there isn't a whole lot that's glaringly bad to me. There are some effects in this movie that have very noticeably not aged the best. I'm not even the biggest fan of how Freddy looks in this entry. I think he looks too wet. And another thing that they mentioned in a behind-the-scenes documentary that I was watching for this is that they were trying to make Freddy look more like a witch type in this movie. And you can tell his nose is more pointed, and there's like different structure to his face. And I don't entirely blame the makeup team, because apparently they kind of had to do whatever they could to figure out how to do Freddy's makeup in this entry, because they didn't have any notes or anything to go off of for how they did it in the first film. But in the same breath, too, it doesn't look anywhere near as good as it did in that first movie, so it's hard to not knock a few points against the film for that. When the film does hit the mark, though, and have a good scene, it really does, and it does have a lot of very memorable sequences throughout, especially our dream sequences throughout the movie, even the opening one of the film showing our lead character, Jesse, on this bus as it drives into the desert, as all of the land around the bus starts to cave in and the bus is sitting up on these two columns, and Freddy is revealed to be the bus driver, and he starts to walk towards Jesse and these two other girls on the bus, and you see the bus starting to tip. It's a very, very fun scene and a great way to open the film, but my all-time favorite dream sequence in this film, and the one that I always think of when watching it, would be the scene of Jesse at the bottom of the staircase with Freddy. It's a very erotic scene, and I think it was done purposefully so, as you have Freddy getting very up close and personal with Jesse. And again, I think this is where the subtext leans more into just being text, something that even Robert Englund himself has openly admitted about this whole sequence. As you see him grab Jesse and start to trace his finger knives across Jesse's face, Robert even went on to say this about the scene. So it's definitely not me just reaching that it's a very, very gay sequence.
And I remember asking Mark if I could make that, if I could make it kind of, and I think the word is homoerotic. Mark and I are nose to nose, and I've got the claw on him like this. And one of the pieces of coverage, I rim his mouth.
Another memorable scene, too, that we have is there's this gym teacher in the film, and as Jesse is becoming more possessed by Freddy's spirit, Jesse ends up wandering out of his home in the middle of the night in his pajamas out into the pouring rain before he ends up at this gay bar and finds his gym teacher there, who's a total hard ass, dressed up in leather, only to end up grabbing him and taking him back to the school and forcing him to run laps around the gymnasium. If this feels a little pervy and a little predatory, that's definitely because it is. I feel like that gym teacher did not have good motives grabbing up a high schooler in the middle of the night and forcing him to run laps. It very much gave a BDSM vibe, and his death really only confirms that much more for me, because shortly after this, he ends up in the locker room and all these balls start flying around the room. And again, I feel like the subtext was almost just text there, like, again, but all these balls start shooting out and flying at him before he's eventually stripped down to his bare ass, and then he is hung up into the gym showers and essentially, like, whipped to death by towels. There's even a shot of one of the towels smacking his ass multiple times. It's very, very hokey, but Freddy appears in the shower, and then in the mist, when he finally disappears, we have Jesse standing in the shower, and he is wearing Freddy's glove, and he lets out this very, very shrill scream, which very much isn't having him be any of the gay allegations he had, which I think that's one thing that's kind of sad about this movie, is it did kind of kill his career. He was very closeted when this movie came out, and at the time he didn't know that what he was stepping into was going to be this movie filled with all this gay subtext. And if you want to know more about Mark Patton's life and his experience making this movie, there's a documentary that I would massively recommend to you guys. You should check out Scream Queen: My American Nightmare. It is a really good movie, and it tells you a lot about his experience making the movie and then his struggle with AIDS. I think it's a very fascinating watch. This entry too, even though some of the effects, like I said, can be hokey at times, what's not hokey to me is a lot of the body horror they were able to create in this film. You have all these scenes of Jesse transforming into Freddy as his skin peels apart. Freddy's knives start to form out of his own fingertips, and it's very gruesome stuff. You even have in one of my favorite sequences of the movie where Jesse ends up at Grady's home, and when he gets there, Grady is looking handsome as ever in bed. He's shirtless, and whew, that guy was a total dreamboat back then. But as he's in the room with Grady, he tries to get Grady to not let him fall asleep, but then lo and behold, Jesse does fall asleep and he wakes up screaming, only for Freddy to literally tear his way out of Jesse. And then Freddy goes after Grady, kills him, and makes it to where Jesse has a chance to live his heteronormative life. Unfortunately. The final climax of the movie is admittedly fun too, even if it does break a lot of the rules of this franchise so early on. But you are at Lisa's house. She is throwing a house party and all of her classmates are over before Jesse ends up coming and goes Freddy Krueger mode and starts to kill all of the party goers. You get some really fun kills here as people are literally getting boiled alive in this pool, the pool getting set on fire. You have people getting slashed by Freddy. You even have this one guy who tries to get like personal with Freddy and explain to him like, man, you don't have to do this. Like, we can help you. Like, we got you, dude. And that goes about as well as you would expect it to for him, and Freddy ends up killing him before dropping one of his most iconic lines of the entire franchise.
You are all my children now.
After this party massacre, though, we have Lisa going back to the boiler room. On the boiler room stuff, there is some stuff there where things work very well for me, and then there's other things that just don't work at all. Like when Lisa first gets to the boiler room, you have her find these two dogs that have baby faces, but like they're very obviously just masks and they look really stupid. But what I do like during this scene is as she's looking for Freddy and going down all these different corridors and going up these stairs, that you have her getting these weird, like, awake dreams. There's this one part where there's maggots forming all over this cut she has on her leg, and she's freaking out and swiping them off, only for all of a sudden her to realize that there's a bandage on her leg still and that they were never there. Or another part where she's running down across one of the grates, and then all of a sudden it collapses and she's holding on to the handbar and it looks like she's about to fall through, only for it to zoom back and you realize that she wasn't falling at all, that she imagined the whole thing and Freddy made her see that. And that's one of my favorite aspects of this franchise, when they make the nightmares bleed into the real world and trip you up a little bit. Because it's been a while since I've seen this movie, especially with that falling grate scene. I didn't remember that happening, so I briefly was like, oh, she's just gonna pull herself out, only for me to be like, oh yeah, okay, it never happened. Wow, okay. Lisa eventually finds Freddy, and the two go back and forth for a minute about how Jesse is or isn't dead, but Lisa doesn't give up and admits she loves Jesse, which in turn kills Freddy in a scene of pretty fantastic special effects as he burns up and melts away, essentially using her love to kill off Mr. Krueger and bring Jesse back, giving us their very nuclear family take of a happy ending. And they are not going to last, and I don't think I have to be the one to say that. Even if there wasn't the twist ending that we're about to talk about, those two, they're not going to make the final cut eventually. After saving Jesse, him and Lisa appear sometime later on their way to school and are taking the bus. They are seen joking around and talking with one of their friends, and they all think the nightmare is finally over. Until we have a very strange cut, which, mind you, I didn't edit that cut. That's exactly how it looks in the movie. But Freddy lunges his hand through the friend's chest, and Jesse lets out one last shrill scream as we realize it's the same bus from the beginning of the film driving off into the same desert. And we never see or hear from these characters ever again. It is really disappointing to me that we don't hear from them, especially with the fact that every other entry in this franchise does some form of a callback to the previous one typically. Even if I'm not the biggest fan of how they bring characters back sometimes in these movies, it is still nice to see that we are in a very, very connected world, that everything's cohesive with each other. I am less of a fan of horror franchises that are more all over the place and you don't have more of this like ongoing story with it. But in the same breath too, I can see why they ignored it, because one of the cardinal sins this movie made was having Freddy running around the real world and killing all of those party goers, and there wasn't really much reason for him to be running around like that. Even Wes said it took the fear factor out of all of it, that there was no reason for him to be there. It goes against him being this dream demon per se. And it does feel admittedly hokey, even though I like the pool scene when you have Freddy chasing after them. You have all these characters just running all over the place and cowering, and Freddy looks kind of cartoony in that moment and less scary, but I don't know, I still kind of like it. So, like I said, by all means, it's not an awful movie. There's things that they did here that worked, but overall, it's very much, you could skip this entry and you wouldn't be missing anything out on the Freddy Krueger story really at all, because this movie is a very self-contained story in this franchise, but I would never recommend skipping it because it is a pretty huge part of horror history. It's a pretty huge part of gay cinema history, in my opinion, as well. I mean, can you tell me, like, any franchises, really big horror franchises, that so obviously did a very gay sequel? I think it's really cool that we have this huge, big franchise with a big character like Freddy Krueger, and we have this character that is so blatantly, obviously gay, and then it gives you these weird implications about Freddy's own sexuality as well, and I just think it's a very fascinating topic at the bare minimum, even if the movie isn't the world's greatest. But you guys should let me know what you thought of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Is it like one of your favorites? Did you hate it? I would love to hear all about it. And if you guys are new here and you want more content in the future just like this, I'd love if you click that subscribe button right down below. I am currently covering all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but if that doesn't entirely tickle your fancy, I have covered other franchises on this channel, and I cover anything and everything horror, so I'm sure eventually I'd have something you'd like, hopefully. But anyways, with that all out of the way, this has been Justice, and I really hope to see you guys on the next one. Take care.